Hey, this is Dave DeCamp from antiwar.com. This is anti-war news for Tuesday, October 15th, 2024. All right, first thing, another reminder that it is fundraising season at antiwar.com. If you appreciate the content that antiwar.com puts out, this is how we're able to do it. We are 100% reader funded, which means we have to do these fundraisers every once in a while. We started this one last week. We're trying to raise $100,000. I think we're around the $15,000 mark. We should have some matching funds coming in soon, which will bump that up nicely, but we need some help. If you have the means, please go to antiwar.com/donate to see the different ways that you can support us. You could always call Angela. There's a phone number here that you can call up if you have any questions. If you have any questions for me, feel free to email me or message me or whatever. I get back to people pretty quickly. So again, antiwar.com/donate. All right, let's get into the news here. The first story at the top of antiwar.com today: Israel plans to strike Iran before the U.S. election. So the Washington Post reported on Monday that Israel is planning to launch its expected attack on Iran before the U.S. presidential elections are held on November 5th. An unnamed official told the Post that waiting any longer could be perceived as weakness and that the planned strike will be one in a series of responses. So they're saying it will be one in a series of responses. So that sounds like if there is some Israeli airstrikes on Iran, there could be more after, the first round of them. A source close to Netanyahu told the Post that while Israel was coordinating with the U.S. to some extent on its plans to attack Iran, it would not wait for a green light from the U.S. The official said, quote, "The person who will decide on the Israeli response to Iran will be Netanyahu," end quote. The report said that when Netanyahu spoke with Biden last week, he said that Israel planned to hit military infrastructure inside Iran, not oil or nuclear facilities. The conversation was a factor in Biden's decision to deploy a Terminal High Altitude Area Defense, or THAAD, missile battery to Israel. So during that conversation, that phone call that they had last week, Netanyahu sounds like he told Biden what he wanted to hear. And as a result of that, Biden is deploying a missile battery and about 100 U.S. troops to Israel. And of course, you also have the Israeli officials saying anything is ultimately up to them. So there's always a chance that they're not going to do what they're telling the U.S. they're going to do. And again, so Biden's deploying that missile battery and 100 U.S. troops. And Iran has said that they're going to respond to any sort of Israeli attack on their territory. And that would mean those U.S. troops, that missile system could be a potential target of Iranian missiles. So the Post report noted how the Biden administration has been fully supportive of Israel's invasion of Lebanon and its dramatic escalation of airstrikes against the country. A former Israeli official said that the U.S. was, quote, "giving Israel and the Netanyahu government a bear hug, but for Hezbollah. It is sending THAAD and promising all kinds of weapons that we need to finish off Hezbollah, saying that we can deal with Iran later," end quote. So I guess that's the strategy. Give them everything they want for Lebanon and hope that they don't bomb Iran too hard here. At the same time, it's hard to believe that they have really any hope of, or if they're really trying at all to constrain Israel. U.S. military and diplomatic support for Israel over the past year has fueled the slaughter in Gaza and emboldened Israeli escalations across the Middle East and has now brought the U.S. and Iran to the brink of war. And that Brown University Cost of War project estimated that it cost the U.S. $22.76 billion in 1 year since October 7th to support Israel. And most of that, I believe about $17.9 billion is military aid, and then the rest is on operations in the region. And that cost is going to go way, way up, if things blow up with Iran. I think I wouldn't be surprised if we see more military aid, more new military aid being authorized by Congress once they come back into session for Israel. I mean, we were already seeing people like Lindsey Graham talking about that, saying we got to get them more more money, more aid. That's one thing that these Iranian attacks do, is that they get Congress wanting to give Israel more money. All right, so the next one here, Iran says it halted indirect talks with the U.S. in Oman. Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi said Monday that Iran had halted indirect talks with the U.S. via Omani mediators amid anticipation of a U.S.-supported Israeli attack on Iranian territory. So Araghchi said, quote, "Currently, we do not see any ground for these talks until we can get past the current crisis," end quote. When asked if he had sent any messages to the U.S. while visiting Oman, so he made these comments from Oman, Araghchi said, quote, "During the trip, no messages have been sent to other countries," end quote. So earlier this year, Axios reported that the U.S. and Iran held indirect talks in Oman to avoid regional escalations. And this is a place where they have gone to negotiate before. And again, these are indirect talks. So you have the U.S. officials in one room or in one embassy and the Iranians in another, and then the Omanis are mediating. Or I know Oman sometimes just sends messages back and forth. There was a report from Al Jazeera that said Iran did send a message to the U.S. through Qatar recently. And that message was, they said that their phase of self-restraint was over and that any Israeli attack on its territory would provoke a major response. That's the message Iran has sent the U.S. And, the fact that there's no, back in April, when Israel bombed the Iranian embassy building, the consulate in Damascus, and Iran responded by firing missiles and drones at Israel, they gave a 72-hour notice beforehand. And there were these talks probably going on in Oman. So the U.S. and Iran were essentially talking to make sure things didn't get out of control between them. But when Iran fired the ballistic missiles at Israel on October 1st, the recent attack, there was no sort of warning, and it looked like more missiles got through. So I think it's just a different ballgame now, and Iran is making that clear. I think the Ayatollah has made that clear in his speeches. Iran was doing everything it could to avoid war with the U.S., it seemed like. But now I think it has just a different attitude. I think after the Nasrallah killing, what we're seeing in Lebanon, the scale of destruction, that the Ayatollah thinks that, whether he likes it or not, war is going to come to him. So they're not going to sit back and kind of take these strikes from Israel. Of course, if this thing does blow up, everybody forgets. I know Iran is well aware, but everybody else seems to forget that Israel has nuclear weapons. So that's always a factor, something to factor in when you're preparing for a potential conflict with a country if they have nukes. So we will see how things go in these next few weeks. All right, so the next one here, Israeli strike on Lebanon Christian village kills 22. So on Monday, Israeli warplanes carried out an attack on a small apartment building in the northern Lebanese village of Aitu in the Christian-majority Zagarta district. This article was written by Jason Ditz, by the way. So at least 22 people have been killed in the attack, according to the Lebanese Red Cross, which also wounded at least 8. So at least 8 people wounded, 22 killed. There's been no official comment from the Israeli military on why they attacked the Christian-majority village. That's not unusual when the Israeli strike doesn't appear to have had any military target or purpose. Speculation is that the attack was primarily a revenge attack against Lebanon in response to the Sunday drone attack by Hezbollah that killed 4 soldiers. The speculation is that Israel is just trying to do some damage in Lebanon, so they bombed a village way in the north. Again, a majority Christian area. Jason says that Israeli media has been speculating that the attack on this Christian village may have targeted a senior Hezbollah leader, but there's been no sign of that at all. There's been no evidence of that at all. And this northern area of Lebanon has not been considered militarily significant throughout the ongoing conflict, and there hadn't been an Israeli attack anywhere near this area since the 2006 war. Israeli attacks on Christian targets are not unheard of. At any rate, just last week, Israel launched a missile strike against a Catholic church in the southern area of Tyre. They actually destroyed the Catholic church and killed 8 people in that attack. It was sheltering some displaced people. So Israel, Israel's bombed churches in Gaza. They're bombing churches in Lebanon. This is something I wish a lot of American Christians would wake up to, is how Israel treats the Palestinian Christians and the indiscriminate nature of their attack on Lebanon. All right, so the next one here, the UN will not withdraw peacekeepers from southern Lebanon. This is another article from Jason here. Despite an incident on Sunday in which Israeli tanks forced their way into a UNIFIL peacekeeper base in southern Lebanon and ended up firing near the base, the UN has rejected Israeli calls to withdraw from the area. The UN Security Council issued a statement expressing support for the UNIFIL monitoring mission and affirmed that the troops will remain in the country despite multiple calls from Netanyahu to leave. So the statement also called on all parties to respect the safety and security of UNIFIL personnel and premises in Lebanon. They did not single Israel out in the statement, although the reported attacks on UNIFIL targets in recent weeks have been all from the Israeli side. They didn't single out Israel because the U.S. is on the UN Security Council, and of course they're not going to put out a statement criticizing Israel specifically from the seat of the UN Security Council. So they're saying that they're going to stay. Netanyahu put out another statement, another video message to the UNIFIL peacekeepers on Monday, telling them to get out of harm's way. That usually means that they, whenever the Israelis tell you to leave somewhere, that's essentially a threat. If you don't leave, we're going to bomb you. So there's a good chance that these attacks continue. I wonder if at any point the UN peacekeepers are going to start firing back. All right, so the next one here, Israeli forces kill 62 Palestinians in Gaza. Gaza's health ministry said Monday that Israeli forces killed 62 Palestinians in Gaza and injured 220 over the previous 24-hour period, bringing its recorded death toll since last October to 42,289 and the number of wounded to 98,684. The ministry's numbers do not account for Palestinians who are missing and presumed dead under the rubble, and bodies have been difficult for rescuers to reach in northern Gaza, where Israel really has ramped things up. And also the death toll doesn't include the indirect deaths. So, one of the most horrific things I've seen, one of the most horrific videos I've seen coming out of Gaza was the result of a strike early Monday morning. I mentioned it yesterday. Israel targeted Palestinians sheltering in tents on the grounds of the Al-Aqsa Martyrs Hospital in central Gaza. The Israeli attack ignited fires in the camp, burning Palestinians alive. Hospital records show that at least 4 people were killed and 40 were injured, but many of the wounded are not expected to survive the burns. You look at the aftermath of this, these scorched tents. And again, this is in hospital grounds, so it's not just an attack on a tent camp. It's an attack on a tent camp within a hospital. Mohammed Tahir, a volunteer surgeon, told Al Jazeera that many of the victims had burns on 60% to 80% of their body. He said, quote, "Patients with significant high percentage burns, unfortunately, their fate is sealed. They won't even make it to the ICU. They will die. It's a horror show here. Honestly, sometimes I feel like this is not real life, that this can go on and this degree of suffering is allowed to happen in this world," end quote. So he's saying, at least 4 people were killed, but a lot more, it sounds like, are going to die. And again, these videos, you could actually see people burning and screaming, and it's just, man. Israel confirmed that they targeted the hospital and claimed that they hit a Hamas command and control center. That's the claim that they always make, never offer any evidence to back it up. And just hours before the strike on the tent camp, Israel targeted a school-turned-shelter in the Nuseirat refugee camp in central Gaza, killing at least 22 people, including 15 children. And I saw lots of pictures of the aftermath of that and a lot of the bodies of children, dead babies being brought to the hospitals and morgues, wrapped up in the sheet. Just massacre after massacre after massacre, all on the U.S. dime. It's just never ending. And I just mentioned at the end of the article that the U.S. continues to support all of this genocidal slaughter in Gaza. Doesn't matter whatever they do, they'll keep sending them weapons, especially now that most of the focus is on Lebanon and the situation with Iran. All right, so the next one here, Israel intensifies assault on northern Gaza. This is from Al Jazeera, just some updates on what's happening in the north, where Israel is carrying out this ethnic cleansing campaign. They're saying... the Israeli media is saying that they're doing a scaled-down version of the ethnic cleansing plan, which it seems like they're just trying not to do it too openly. But they've imposed a full siege on northern Gaza. They told everybody to evacuate to the south. So on Monday, Israeli forces killed 10 Palestinians waiting for food at a distribution center and wounded 40 others, and this was in the Jabalia refugee camp. Another 8 people were killed in a separate incident in Gaza City's Sheikh Radwan district. There was another attack on a school-turned-shelter in the Jabalia camp that killed 3. And then 4 were killed by artillery in Jabalia. So this is, again, where the focus of the attack is on the Jabalia refugee camp. And look at this picture at the top here from Al Jazeera. This is Jabalia. I mean, it's just... looks like a post-apocalyptic movie or something. It's just completely destroyed. I mean, it looks like the pictures of Hiroshima and Nagasaki and Dresden and all of the things that we thought only happened in the distant past. So anyway, where was I here? So one thing I wanted to mention is that there was all these reports that Israel let in aid. Israel claimed on Monday that it allowed 30 trucks carrying flour and food from the UN's main food agency to travel through the northern crossing after inspection. The UN has not confirmed the statement. It was unclear where the aid went because the UN says trucks traveling through that crossing do not go directly to the north. Gaza's government media office has refuted the claim, saying Israel is lying about allowing trucks in, saying that it's completely false. The office said that the Israeli army continued to prevent trucks from reaching northern Gaza. So we've seen this before, that Israel claims, they let a certain amount of trucks into a certain crossing, but then we see denials from the UN and Hamas or whoever else is on the ground there. So we'll see if any aid actually gets in. I saw other reports saying that it got in, but it didn't get to Jabalia or the other areas that are like completely under siege. All right, so the next one here, U.S. officials attend meetings at the Ceding Teiman torture facility. So this article is from The Guardian. So this says that officials from the U.S.'s main humanitarian aid agency, which is the U.S. Agency for International Development, or USAID, or USAID, whatever you prefer. They've been attending daily meetings on an Israeli military base that also hosts a notorious prison for Palestinian detainees where torture runs rampant. And this is first reported by The Guardian. So this is Ceding Teiman. And this is, so since July 29th, U.S. aid officials have been going to these meetings at this torture and rape facility, which is what it is. I mean, this is we had all these claims from Palestinians come out alleging horrific torture abuses, and then we had Israeli whistleblowers come out basically confirming those claims, and then we had video evidence of some of the most horrific claims, which was the rape, and some Israeli soldiers were arrested, and that sparked a protest. I mean, it just goes to show the sick state of Israeli society that you had people protesting the arrest of Israeli soldiers who essentially gang raped a prisoner. But anyway, so this is where U.S. aid officials are going to have meetings with Israeli officials. They call this the Joint Coordination Board, which is about coordinating on aid deliveries to Gaza. So, you know, there's been no changes at this facility as far as I'm aware. In the U.S., it's just another example of the war crimes that Israel continues to commit with no accountability at all from the U.S., its main backer. And then we learn that U.S. officials are actually going to this facility to hold meetings. All right, so the next one here, Nobel winning Hiroshima survivors Gaza comparison angers Israel. So this article is from Middle East Eye. So Israel has attacked a prominent survivor of the Hiroshima atomic bombing over a comparison he made between the blast and the current assault on Gaza. Toshiyuki Mimaki, a leader of the Nihon Hidanko organization that represents survivors of the U.S. attack, compared the two after the group was announced as the recipient of the Nobel Peace Prize on Friday. He said, quote, "I thought for sure it would be the people working so hard in Gaza, as we've seen. In Gaza, bleeding children are being held by their parents. It's just like in Japan 80 years ago," end quote. So in response, Israel's ambassador to Japan attacked the comparison, calling it outrageous and baseless, and said that such comparisons distort history and dishonor the victims. So the one thing about this is we've seen Israeli officials compare what they're doing in Gaza to what the U.S. did in Japan in World War II and what the Allies did in Germany in World War II. Things like Dresden, the atomic bombings of the Japanese cities, and the firebombing of Tokyo. They've actually pointed to these things to justify what they're doing. So now they're mad at a survivor of the Hiroshima atomic bombing, just pointing out that lots of children are being killed as well as they were being killed in Japan 80 years ago. I mean, that's all he said. And they're upset. The Israeli embassy is upset about it. And this is something even Netanyahu, according to Biden, Netanyahu has brought this up, has pointed to Hiroshima and Nagasaki to justify what he was doing in Gaza. In conversations with President Biden. So, and then they act like they're all offended when he says this. And this article reminded me, I forgot about this. In August, the U.S. and British ambassadors to Japan skipped the ceremony commemorating the victims of the Hiroshima bombing because the city's mayor did not invite the Israeli ambassador. Just playing politics like that. All right, so the next one here, Ukraine considers ceding territory to end war. So Der Spiegel, the German outlet, reported on Sunday that the Ukrainian government is considering options to end the war with Russia that would involve ceding territory. The report said it was the first time since Russia's invasion in February 2022 that the Ukrainian leadership has considered a deal that would not involve it getting back all of the territory Russian forces have captured since February 2022. Under a peace deal that was on the table in March and April 2022, Russia would have withdrawn its forces back to pre-invasion lines. But that deal was discouraged by the U.S. and other NATO countries who urged the Ukrainians to fight. So I just included that important context when we're talking about this. It wasn't until later in 2022 that Russia, annexed the territories that it controlled and everything. But this is significant if this report's right, because over the past 2 years, Zelensky's been pushing his peace formula, which calls for a full Russian withdrawal before peace talks can even begin. And of course, that's a non-starter for talks with Russia. And this official Ukrainian source speaking to Der Spiegel said, quote, "We believed that victory had to mean the unconditional surrender of Putin's Russia," end quote. Then the official acknowledged that that was misguided and that a deal must also be beneficial for Russia. So this report comes as Russian forces continue to make gains in the east. Ukrainian forces still control a small chunk of Russia's Kursk Oblast, and Russian troops are slowly pushing them back. It seems like it's going to take a while for that fighting for them to push them all the way out. But it's not like Ukraine's going to break in any further, or that it's really a significant piece of territory that can be traded for anything significant. What's interesting, this Ukrainian official said that Ukraine believes the U.S. will slowly wind down its support for Ukraine, whether Harris or Trump wins in November. Of course, Trump is running on ending the war in Ukraine, while Harris is vowing to continue supporting Kiev. But this official said, quote, "Whether it's Trump or Harris, the Americans will slowly but surely withdraw. The prognosis is poor," end quote. All right, so the next one here, China conducts blockade drills around Taiwan. So the Chinese People's Liberation Army, the PLA, conducted a blockade drill around the island of Taiwan on Monday and said the military exercises were a warning against Taiwan independence. Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesman Wu Chan said the drills were a direct response to a speech from Taiwanese President William Lai Ching-te delivered this past Thursday. Lai said that Taiwan, officially known as the Republic of China, was not subordinate to mainland China, which is known as the People's Republic of China. Wu said that Lai and others were, quote, forgetting their roots and deliberately severing historical ties across the Taiwan Strait, end quote. Also said he was inciting conflict. Wu added that Taiwan has never been a country and will never be one, which is, that's China's position, official position. The Chinese blockade drills, officially dubbed the Joint Sword 2024B exercises, were carried out to the north, south, and east of Taiwan and in the Taiwan Strait. The Taiwanese Defense Ministry said that throughout Monday, it detected 17 Chinese naval vessels and 17 Coast Guard vessels around Taiwan. See this map here? These red areas are where they conducted the drills. The PLA said that they were done, that they concluded the drills on Monday evening. So China conducted its first blockade drill around Taiwan back in August 2022 when Nancy Pelosi, when she was the House Speaker, when she went to visit Taiwan, a very provocative trip for no purpose other than increasing tensions. China launched its largest ever military exercises around Taiwan in response. Then when Kevin McCarthy was briefly House Speaker, he met with Taiwan's last president, Tsai Ing-wen, and that provoked another blockade drill. So this is something we might see, we're probably going to see more often from China. And this kind of creates a scenario where, if they make these blockade drills kind of a regular thing, they increase them more and more. If China does decide to make a move on Taiwan, they could just do these drills and then just say, hey, it's a real blockade. Here are our demands. And then what's going to happen then? Is the U.S. going to try to break the blockade? It really goes to show how this is an island right off the coast of China, very far from the U.S. They have, obviously have the upper hand here. And China, they're also warning against, in this statement, Wu warned against outside interference, which is referring to the U.S.'s increasing support for Taiwan. The U.S. recently announced a new military aid package for Taiwan, which is a new thing they just started giving them last year. So the U.S. is ignoring all these warnings from China. Very familiar story. All right, so the next one here, the U.S. approves $2.2 billion in arms sales for Saudi Arabia and the UAE. The Biden administration has approved a series of arms sales for Saudi Arabia and the UAE, worth a combined total of $2.2 billion. The Pentagon's Defense Security Cooperation Agency said that on October 11th, the State Department approved one potential sale to the UAE for the GMLRS precision-guided rocket system, ATACMS munitions, and related equipment worth an estimated $1.2 billion, so a pretty big sale to the UAE. And then there's three separate deals for Saudi Arabia. They're getting Sidewinder air-to-air missiles, Hellfire air-to-ground missiles, and ammunition for artillery systems, tanks, and machine guns. So this happens. There was reports recently that Biden was going to start selling offensive weapons to Saudi Arabia again. They never really stopped. They stopped selling certain kinds of things, but this is a big deal now, a big sale that we're seeing here. And the U.S. kind of sees Saudi Arabia and the UAE as potential allies against Iran, but we've seen the Saudis distancing themselves from the U.S. Defense of Israel, and they just hosted the Iranian foreign minister. They don't want anything to do with these regional escalations. They're not even bombing the Houthis anymore. The U.S. is the one bombing the Houthis. And then some other things that the UAE and Saudi Arabia are up to today. We hear all this stuff about the rules-based order, but and the U.S. claims that it wants the civil war in Sudan, the brutal war in Sudan, to end. The UAE is actually fueling that war by covertly sending weapons to the RSF. And then Saudi Arabia, they've been accused, I think credibly accused, of slaughtering migrants at their border with Yemen. That's something that's been going on this year. But send them some more, send them some missiles and artillery shells and all sorts of stuff. All right, so the last story here, North Korea threatens war with South over drone flights. So this article is from Kyle Anzalone at the Libertarian Institute. Tensions have been very high on the Korean Peninsula. This is an area, I talk about China and Ukraine. I neglect that stuff enough lately, but Korea is something I've been meaning to cover. Tensions, it's been kind of the same pattern that we've seen over the past few years. Just tensions just rising and rising, back and forth, lots of rhetoric, bombastic rhetoric. So the latest thing is that North Korea is threatening war with the South over drone flights near Pyongyang. Seoul says that it is prepared for war should conflict break out. On Monday, a spokesman for North Korea said that tensions have reached a grave touch-and-go level and said that it was due to, quote, South Korea's wanton violation of the sovereignty of North Korea, which infiltrations of drones into its capital city, end quote. So North Korea accused the South of operating 3 drones in Pyongyang and dropping leaflets that insult the North Korean government. And they're basically saying that we're ready to go to war over this. And the statement said that artillery units along the border and the units taking on an important firepower task, basically saying that the artillery units on the border are getting ready to open fire. And South Korea is basically saying, well, we're fully ready for an attack. What do you got? So this, this is probably just a lot of bluster here. But again, tensions are really high. And there's no sign of them cooling. So this is something that, it's always good to kind of keep an eye on. And South Korea did a big missile test as well. The South Korea, not the North. South Korea did one of its first tests in a few years. So again, just things are really ratcheting up on the Korean Peninsula. All right, that is it for the news for today. Please go check out our viewpoints, one from Jeremy Scahill and Sharif Abdel Kudos. Israel is turning northern Gaza into a killing cage. One from Daniel McAdams, do they want American troops to die? It seems like they might. One from Daniel Larison, nukes up, North Korea tests absent U.S. policy. One from Eves Engler, let's go Israel, bomb Iran. Of course, that's some sarcasm in the title there. And one from Connor Freeman at the Libertarian Institute, Americans must end Israel's serial slaughter of Gaza's children. And there's a lot about what those American doctors who have been to Gaza, the horrors that they saw and what they have had to say. And that's what the U.S. is supporting. So please go check all of that out. Again, fundraising season, go to antiwar.com/donate to help us out. Other ways you could help us is by sharing this show. Tell your friends about antiwar.com. Like, subscribe, comment, follow us on social media. All that stuff helps out. I'll be back tomorrow with some more news. Thanks for listening.